Hey guys, Kingpin here. Welcome to the next episode of Sandbox Mode. In case you're brand new to the channel or new to this series in general, we're focusing on making realistic exhibits in realistic areas in our zoo. In the last episode, we actually made a black and white ruffed lemur enclosure as our first animal in this zoo, and they're enjoying it greatly. They have plenty of enrichment items and have ample space to climb around and jump to their heart's content. They're really happy in this exhibit. Stay tuned to later in the video, because they're going to be name dropped. We have a male and a female to name. You guys aren't going to want to miss it. We have three main goals in this episode. The first goal, to the left of the entrance, we're going to have a ticket booth. I think that just makes sense. Guests need a way to get into the zoo. Secondly, we're going to make a giant lake as the centerpiece of this zoo. It'll make it a lot easier to plan out future projects and branch off of it going forward. And thirdly, we're going to make a brand new exhibit today. It's going to be a longer episode, so stay tuned. This is going to be a good one. It looks like the lemurs are asleep right now. We'll have to come back later when they wake up to reveal their names. Channel growth lately has been absolutely insane. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm really glad you like the content enough to like and subscribe. Hope to see you here for years to come, because I don't plan on going anywhere. That being said, if you haven't liked and subscribed yet and you enjoyed today's video, why not give it a shot? I promise I won't let you down. Content has no plans on stopping anytime soon, so stick around. When making a lake or any large body of water in Planet Zoo, you realistically only need to use two terrain features. The first feature you need to use is the push feature, just to get a basic depth, and then after that, go into the hole that you dug and use the flatten to terrain feature. Go crazy, this is supposed to look as natural as possible. You don't really want a natural looking lake to look kind of uniform and planned out. Make it like this lake was here before, and you had to build the zoo around it. After that, I'm going to be taking this path, making it wide enough to fit in with the rest of the path that we've made in our opening pavilion, and then just go around the lake. I'm trying to stick relatively close to the bank, so guests won't be able to fall in or throw food into the lake and get the fish all sick. We're using our imagination there, obviously, but I'm trying to keep it pretty realistic. There can be picnic tables, benches, maybe exhibits all along this thing, and it'll make it a lot easier in the future to branch off and choose where our exhibits are going to go. It helps with planning a lot. It's recently dawned on me that in this series I haven't really had a foliage tutorial, and that's one of the most important aspects of the game to get good at if you want to delve into realism. The very first tip that I have is remember where your zoo's located. If your zoo's located in South America, you're going to want to use plants and trees, rocks, everything native to the region from South America, because that's simply where your zoo is located. Now, if you have, American bison exhibit in your zoo in South America, you can have some North American plants in there. But if it's an area like this, that's not necessarily part of any exhibit, it's just scenery, you should probably use plants that are local to the region. That's why we're only using plants found in North America for this area. We're going to use things like buffalo grass, beech trees, cattails, common reeds, pretty basic plants, because this is a pretty basic environment. Also, always make sure you have random rotation on. That is the number one tip I can give for doing any type of foliage. Other than that, it's really just settings. If you're using grass, have align to surface enabled so it doesn't float. If you're using water lilies, lily pads, or any type of aquatic plant, have align to the surface of the water available. That way, it's not going to be sinking under the surface and it'll be as realistic as possible. What random rotation does, on the other hand, is if you place it, it'll give you a random degree in rotation, so it's completely random, making it as realistic as possible. These tips also can double for rocks too, although we'll talk about those more in depth later on in a future video. They are a little different. Foliage can be really tedious, so never be afraid to take a break and work on something else. That's exactly what we're doing now. This is going to be the start of our ticket booth, an information center on the other side. I figured we'd make it double-sided. This is a very basic and easy build. Effectively what I did was just have 4 information centers, 3 of which are facing the exterior of the zoo, and we're just going to pretend that those are ticket booths. I just needed some building where guests can walk up and buy something so we can have lines outside of it. We're also going to add ATMs later on that are going to double as online ticket things, so you can just use your imagination and pretend this is where the guests are actually buying the tickets. They might be able to do it from their phones, they might be able to do it from the ATMs physically here, but let's just pretend for now. Other than that, I'm having an information center that's really going to be an information center, both in terms of reality and our imagination, on the opposite side of this. This is going to act as our zoo's real information center, where you might get maps, information about animals, or anything else a place like that might be willing to tell you. The design portion of this build was extremely easy. We're using the exact same palette we've used for our other builds in the entrance of this zoo. A simple roof with a simple trim, and then we'll add gutters on top of it later to give a little bit of depth and reality. Remember, this zoo is focused on 100% realism, so all of our buildings are going to need to have a gutter system to get rid of the rain if it happens. I also thought about adding a bathroom to the front of this thing, kind of on the other side. This is going to be one of the first things a guest passes by when they enter the zoo, and one of the last things that they pass by when they leave. That way, they can go to the bathroom if they need to, which is going to be helpful for our guests because guests are notoriously picky, especially in Sandbox mode. They seem to have higher standards, as opposed to franchise mode, where they're a little bit more lenient. This is on hard mode after all. I figured with unlimited resources I could use some bit of a challenge. Adding something that's square to an already square building is really easy. Building doesn't get necessarily difficult this game until you go either off the grid or start building curved edges to things, but adding these restroom blocks was as simple as just adding another square and extending the roof a little bit. Building in 90 degrees is really simple. You can add something curved like you can here. All this is basically just a flower bed. We just took something that curves at about a 90-degree angle, not too harsh, and just blended it into the build seamlessly to avoid the corner. After that, I decided to take this little awning thing that we made before and just throw it over top. Copy and pasting gets a bad rep. I think it makes things look more unified. Hey, check it out! Our lemurs are finally up. As promised earlier in the video, let's talk about the name reveals. Both of them came directly from the comments, so thank you for the community engagement. Our female right here is going to be named Queen. And our larger male over here next to Queen is going to be named Beethoven. Both of them have musical-inspired names since they really like to play on their keyboard enrichment item. I thought it was a great idea. Thanks guys for the comments. We still have a lot to do in this episode, so I did a majority of detailing this ticket booth off screen. But, as you can see, we have 3 areas that are information centers, disguised as little ticket booths where guests can go and talk to the people before they actually get into the zoo. This gives the illusion that this is where the guests are buying the tickets. We also have 4 ATMs out there to give the same effect, but this will be more for online tickets, to where you don't necessarily have to talk to somebody. On the back side of this, we have 2 different restroom blocks, because it's the first thing you guests will see upon entering the zoo and the last thing they'll see before leaving. Then we have a real information center, where guests can actually get maps or handed out whatever information they need. Overall, it's a really nice build. Very simple, but it fits in with everything else we've made so far. Now let's get on to the meat and potatoes of this episode. Today we're going to be building a habitat for an animal I've actually never attempted to build for in franchise mode, sandbox mode, career mode, even off camera. This is going to be the first time I'm ever trying to build for the Red Panda, which I don't know how it's taken this long. Red Pandas seem to be a fan favorite animal, as they were easily the most requested starter animal that I do. I chose the black and white ruffed lemurs as our official starter animal, but logistically from the zoo, this would be the first animal that you see. I really want to have an area in this zoo that's completely inspired by Asia. I'm going to call it Asia Quest, and we're going to have everything from binturong to red panda to the Bengal tiger eventually, but now we're going to start relatively small. This exhibit's going to be incredibly easy, mainly being made out of this stone material as a base. We're going to come back over and trim the outside with some wood, very similar to our entrance builds like our gift shop and even ticket booth that we did in this episode. It's not going to look exactly the same, because as we get further and further into the zoo, we want to differentiate the builds a little bit. We're further enough away from the starting enclosures and the starting area that we can differentiate the build a little bit. We're going to keep it relatively similar and not go completely abstract, however the materials are just going to be slightly different. You'll see what I mean later on, but this roof is a little bit different. Our other ones are completely white, and we also use the vertical panels for most. This build's going to be more Asian inspired. Red pandas don't need very much space at all. Matter of fact, they need even less space than our black and white ruffed lemurs. I was a huge fan of the way I used the mesh in the previous exhibit, so I decided to try and redo it, but on an even smaller scale. One of the toughest things to be able to do in Planet Zoo, or any sandbox game in general, is to be able to build on a small scale. Personally, I feel like it would be much easier to make a habitat for the African savanna elephant, which is the animal that needs the most area by far in this game, than it is to make something for a small animal and make it look legitimately good and professional. It's just so much easier to be able to build something that spreads out. However, making something that's purposefully condensed is really challenging, but I think looks all the better in the end. Smaller exhibits and smaller details are what make and break zoos after all. If you look at any YouTuber who's really good at this game and even makes a career out of it, odds are one thing that they do better than myself and better than most other people are the really small details and small exhibits that make their zoos pop. This is exactly why so far in this series we've made 2 exhibits for animals that need less than 250 square meters of space. Yeah, they need some climbing space, that's true, but ground space, they really don't need much at all. They are very easy animals to take care of. The other option that I was considering starting this zoo with was actually going to be the California sea lion, because I really like zoos that start with something so noticeable is a good word to describe them. However, I've already made 2 zoos that started with the California sea lion, and we recently redid it in the H2O Zone series on franchise mode, so I wasn't really too sure if that would work. Plus, I really like the sea lion exhibit we made in the H2O Zone, and to be honest, I don't think I could have topped it right now. This build, like I said, is starting our Asia Quest section, and I've never built an exhibit for any Asian-inspired animal in this game besides the proboscis monkey, so this will be fun. If you watched the last episode on the black and white ruffed lemur, the build process of this habitat is extremely similar. I did the exact same technique for the mesh fence, however this one is less of a square and more of a trapezoid on top. Really easy technique, I only rotated it 15 degrees. Other than that, it's the exact same build. Where these builds differ is this little staff section where the animals can have their indoor viewing. It's not actually going to be a real staff section, there's only a door and a gate so the staff can actually get through, but there's no building attached to it. This was an extremely easy build. Effectively all we did was use this European stone and then throw a Planet Zoo trim from the wood from the base game right on the side of it. It really makes it pop a little bit. I also like this window a lot too, and I actually used the exact same technique to make this pop even further. I simply just took this wood, aligned it to the surface, and then made a trim along the outside. The more colors that match in a build, odds are the better the build is going to flow. Like I said before, I want to use a different palette for this build, as we've never used this stone anywhere else in the zoo, but at the same time, if you look at this build, I want it to be obvious what zoo it came from. So we're using some of the same colors, like this window and the wood. I really like this effect because it still looks like our build palette, however it's different enough to look like its own specific area in the zoo. We're doing the exact same technique for these poles right here that are going to make the mesh look a little bit more sturdy. It's the exact same color we've been using as the trims on our roof for our other builds. However, the color is just being used in a different aspect now. We haven't really had a color of the trim on a mesh fence like this before. The black and white ruffed lemurs use something different, which we're going to use for the right side of the zoo. Alright, the hard part's done, making the basic shape of this thing. Now we can do the fun part and get into some details. We're going to have to add a few things, the first of which is probably going to be the Red Panda's climbing equipment, and then maybe some foliage too. Enrichment items also are never going to hurt them. If you're ever just waiting by for your keepers to bring the red pandas, or any animal for that instance, to your exhibit, one thing that you can do to pass the time is actually go to your habitat gate and then rename it to the name of the animal. This makes exhibit management so much easier, because realistically, habitat 10, that could be anything, but a habitat called Red Panda, take a wild guess what's going to be in this exhibit. And now we wait, because that took forever, and here they come. I guess they had to run across the entire length of the zoo. Alright, and here's our red panda. They're so cute. Let's just check and make sure. That is way too much traversable area for them. We made this thing with about 230 square meters, I think. So where did we go wrong? Is there a hole in the exhibit? I don't think so. We're gonna have to figure this out. Yeah, this thing has 272 square meters. That is less than 400 for sure. And that's why. Okay, this is a really easy fix, luckily. Pretty much all we have to do is just make all of this unclimbable. And to do that, just click on it and hit climbing disabled. Now that should have worked in theory. Oh, that's a cute animation. Yep, if you see where it's black, that means it's not climbable. However, we kind of just used a regular chain link fence at the end of it. We're gonna have to fix that. That's fine though. For now the exhibit's relatively safe. We'll just have to put like a boulder or maybe a rock somewhere right there, because they can only escape from this one section it looks like, and then they can use that to climb up the rest of the exhibit. That's gonna be a problem. I'm actually not quite sure how to fix this yet. Might as well make grade 3 feed while we're here. No staff work zone. Everything else looks good right now, which is acceptable. Hopefully the red pandas just don't find out about that weakness yet. However, I have a very, very strong feeling that they'll find it pretty much immediately. One thing in Planet Zoo that I used to heavily struggle with was being able to place terrain and making it look good. One trick that I found really helps with this is if you have terrain like this rock that you don't necessarily want to have revealed, all you have to do is put that rock terrain under the ground, because even though technically you can't see the rock right now, it is still there. Despite this concrete being the only thing that you can see, the rock under it still counts for the active terrain. This could be snow, it could be sand, it could be absolutely anything, and it would still count as the terrain that the red pandas like, but the only thing that they can see is the concrete. After this, I figured it was time to get the climbing engagement and the enrichment in the exhibit. I wanted to put this forge pool in there, but it was a little bit too big, so we had to settle for this dog chew toy and some wind chimes instead. I really like the idea of having wind chimes for them. Red pandas are solitary creatures, preferring to live life alone. However, we have 2 of them in this exhibit, so we're going to have to make their climbing area big enough to where if they want to have alone time, they don't necessarily have to find each other. Red pandas are native to the temperate forests of the Himalayas and southwestern China. They prefer really cool and more moist environments since they live in high altitudes. We're going to replicate this using their enrichment and their climbing tools. We're going to have their climbing go relatively high into their exhibit, going near the top of the mesh fence, right over their wind chimes. I thought this is a really cool effect because it simulates the red panda's home in the Himalayas quite well. Speaking of our red pandas, be sure to stick to the end of the video where we're going to have a montage of both of them. There's a male and a female again. We're trying to have babies bred in this zoo. They're going to be part of our breeding program, which we'll get into that later. But long story short, it's going to be for all of our critically endangered animals. We're going to have a breeding program to help try to bring awareness for them in real life by playing with them in the game. But anyways, that's a little bit ahead of the story. Stick to the end of the video to be sure to see what enrichment items the red pandas enjoy playing with. Leave a comment suggesting names for them based on how they act. Whatever you guys want. Queen and Beethoven, the black and white ruffed lemurs, need some friends in this zoo. These are our 3rd and 4th animals. Since I've never built for an Asian animal in this game before, I was a little bit confused as to where to start with the terrain, especially so with the foliage. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. The red pandas still needed a lot of climbing area too. I didn't want to give them anything too large like this preset blueprint, so I eventually just decided to make my own and make sure it was added to the group. I used an extremely similar technique I used with our black and white ruffed lemurs. They have a big thing on the outside that they can use, and they have a more skinny climbing area on the inside that they can use to get some privacy. This will also be able to help the keepers train them if they ever need to. I really like this idea because it gives them variety. Animals in zoos tend to get extremely bored if they don't have enough enrichment in real life. In Planet Zoo, on hard mode at least, like we're playing in currently, it's absolutely no different. Animals can legitimately get bored if you play on hard mode, so you have to be careful. That's why we're trying to give them as much variety as they can possibly have. They have some natural things to climb on, some artificial. They have some real trees, they have some bigger trees. They have a lot of different things that they can play with. When you design an exhibit trying to be as realistic as possible, this is one thing you cannot budge on. You have to give animals variety, otherwise they're going to get insanely bored. This not only is true in terms of gameplay, it's also true in real life. Effectively with the foliage, my strategy was just to throw as many different types at the wall and see exactly what stuck. I really like the vines and ivy I ended up using on the walls of the mesh and the brick. However, I really am a big fan of what I'm doing currently with these ferns. I really like how they kind of blend in and start really small and get a little bit progressively larger. I thought that was a really cool effect, because the red pandas are so small and their hitboxes are so tiny in this game that they really can't traverse over a lot of plants, so you have to be very careful with what you put in there. Also, side note, make sure random rotation is off if you're trying to place things precisely like this. That's a mistake I definitely just made, and it wasted a little bit of time. But try to mix up the variety in plants. I always say this, but a forest is not made up of 1 or 2 species of flowers or grasses or even mosses. You have to have at least a dozen different plants inside of an exhibit to make it look realistic. Try to mix up the heights, mix up the sizes, sink some far into the ground, sink some high into the ground. You can even put trees really deep into the ground and make the leaves show to simulate bushes that you wouldn't get otherwise. Just don't do what I'm doing and have this hanging outside, otherwise the red pandas will be able to escape. I learned that the hard way, but luckily I cut it out of the video. The way I found out was easiest to build for Asia is to really not build for Asia. I kind of built this exactly like I would build any other exhibit that I've ever made in Planet Zoo so far. I didn't go crazy overboard with stereotypical Asian plants like water lilies and bamboo. I just made this look like a completely normal temperate forest, which if you recall, that's exactly where red pandas live. I added a lot of different saltwort plants, I added a lot of different ferns, a lot of azaleas. I really like this detail right here. Our tree right there, as you can see, has no leaves on it, but I made all of the colorful leaves at the base of it like it had just fallen off. I did want to add some bamboo in here admittedly, however it is way too tall for this exhibit currently. Plus the red pandas might be able to climb to the top of it and I just didn't want to deal with that. However, I really like these cowberry bushes that I lined the side with. It adds a really nice texture to the grass. I couldn't find a lot of trees that fit down here, unfortunately. That's the one thing I feel like this exhibit is missing. We only have a few cypress trees and even a beech tree sapling. However, it's mainly made up of ivy, a lot of different leaves, and a lot of different flowers and grasses. Overall, incredibly happy with the foliage. The only thing that we have to do left for this build is make it look pretty for the thumbnail. No, I'm just kidding, we actually have to make it look good in general, not just for the thumbnail. Although I'm not gonna lie, that's a huge part of it. I've noticed videos that have kind of incomplete sections in the thumbnail do a lot worse overall than ones that have very complete looking sections. So we're gonna start to do that. Basically what I want here is just a little concrete trim that goes right around the Red Panda exhibit, and then I'll have a statue of some red pandas playing, maybe climbing up a tree on that rock. I learned that one thing that's very easy to do if you have that glitchy texture, I don't know if you can tell what it is, but basically when you put 2 blocks right next to each other and it starts glitching out a little bit, what you can do is just use some rocks to get in there and make it look a little bit more natural. Right here where those 2 pieces were intersecting kind of unnaturally, just throw another rock down. It looks a little bit weird right now, but after we added some plants, it'll look completely normal, I promise. Rocks are a very good detail when working with foliage. After we got our flower patch completely done, fit with our rocks, I wanted to add a few little trees around. These olive trees gave a really nice effect because they look really big, but they're actually pretty small. They're kind of similar to bonsai trees in my opinion. After that, we threw around a few other plants that were native to the region, and then threw down these red panda statues that come with the base game, so everybody has access to them. I also threw this little mask down of a red panda as kind of an Easter egg. Maybe a little kid lost it and is looking for it right now in our zoo. Who knows? After that, I decided to add some habitat webcams around, some security cameras, some benches, trash cans, and anything else I could think of that would make this exhibit 100% complete. I really liked the idea of having this big pole security camera, although we don't have trees big enough to mask it, so I didn't really like it. I also added a do not disturb sign, since red pandas are a little bit prone to stress. Overall, incredibly happy with this exhibit. Let me know what you guys think. Asia Quest is starting off strong. I am incredibly happy with how this turned out. For such a small footprint in the zoo, it packs a really big punch and is a very good first impression for our Asian section. Let me know what you guys want the red pandas to be named too. I've noticed they really like jumping, if that gives you any hints. The one really likes standing on its hind legs as well, but get creative in the comments. I hope you guys are enjoying watching this Sandbox mode series as much as I am playing it. Franchise mode is a blast, but so there's something really special about playing with no stress at all. These Red Pandas are going to agree. This zoo is going to be amazing one day. So far, we only have 4 animals in this zoo, which, by the way, Queen and Beethoven actually are expecting offspring, so expect that in the near future. Soon to be 5 animals, but this zoo is coming along really nicely, and I hope to catch you guys in the next video coming real soon. Kingpin out. I'll see you then.